I want to get right into this. You have a thesis as to how we got here and then how we're going to fix it. Start with how we got here.
Yeah, so how we got here, we draw two important distinctions, right? One is between an ordinary business cyclical decline and a debt deflation. Another is between an ordinary debt deflation and a debt deflation that's sort of grounded in a long-term global shift in the balance between supply and demand. And that's essentially what we've had recently, right? The recent bubble and bust all grew out of an enormous imbalance between global supply and global demand. Itself the response or the result of the last 20 years worth of the entry of at least 2 billion new workers onto the world economy from the former socialist nations.
That's a key thesis, right?
Very
India
key.
and China, 2 billion more workers, so that takes jobs from American workers.
Well, not necessarily in the long run, but certainly in the short term, yes. We've definitely got, basically, we've added enormous productive capacity to the economy, to the world economy, by dint of the emergence of these new nations and the entry of their laborers into the workforce. But we haven't had a sort of a commensurate rise yet in absorptive capacity.
One of the other problems, you say, is we got accustomed to easy money, way too accustomed.
And those are related, right? I mean, basically, as real incomes and real wealth were sort of stagnating as a result of this change in the global economy, credit, consumer credit and housing credit became an attractive sort of substitute to sort of make up for the loss in aggregate demand power worldwide.
Okay, you got a 3-point way to fix the problem. Now, this is where the conversation gets interesting. Run us through your 3 points.
All right, so basically we've got 3 pillars, and each of the pillars addresses sort of one important feature of the current difficulties, right? So the first problem, of course, is we've got a massive debt overhang left over, right, from the collapse of the bubble itself. So on the one hand, we want to trim back the debt, right, through debt restructuring, and at the same time, we want to buttress income and wealth from the other side with a massive infrastructure investment program, right? Then at the same time, the third pillar of the plan addresses the long-term global imbalance itself, right? We're trying to sort of speed up the rate at which the world's absorptive capacity can catch up with its current productive capacity.
All right, so if I'm hearing you right, you've got to restructure people's mortgage debt, number one.
Right.
Number two, you have to create an infrastructure spending program. And number three, you got to restructure the way countries are indebted or loaned to one another.
Yes, exactly.
That's a tall order.
It's a very tall order, but we're thinking that it's a tall order, of course, because it's a serious problem, right? The problem itself is serious enough to warrant a serious response.
Let me ask you this. If banks can take a write-down of 50% on Greek debt, can banks take a write-down of 50% on mortgage debt?
Well, we're certainly not pushing for a write-down of 50% on mortgage debt, but we're pushing for well, it depends on the particular mortgages, right? And so what I'm going to do is encourage your listeners or your readers to read the plan, because it's a very detailed plan, Pillar 2, on mortgage restructuring. In particular, I think one of the principal advances of this particular pillar of our plan is we distinguish among those who have difficulties with their mortgages. We subclassify them into 3 separate classes. One of the problems with approaches thus far is the sort of one-size-fits-all nature of the problem. So
we only have about 90 seconds, so we got to keep this moving. But if banks were to take a write-down on people's debt, they might not have enough capital. That's one concern.
Yeah, and for that reason, we also accompany the write-down plan with some regulatory relaxation as well in the capital regs.
All right, sounds like it's hard to get excited about investing in banks under your plan. What about infrastructure?
Infrastructure. Well, as you know, the American Society of Engineers has said we've got about a $2.2 trillion deficit, so to speak, in infrastructure. Infrastructure has been deteriorating rapidly over the last number of years. It's going to take at least $2 trillion to get it back up to snuff. About $1 trillion is already slated for expenditure. We want to put in the other $1 trillion.
All right, talk to me about the protesters, what's happening. They live around the corner from your apartment.
Yeah, they're my neighbors, actually. Yeah, and it's actually quite a very interesting movement. I think this is a different sort of movement from what I was expecting, right? At first I thought, oh, this is just going to be a replay of the old 1999 Seattle riots or something like that.
Angry.
These people are not as much angry, I think, as they are indignant, and they actually are working very hard to arrive at specific policy proposals that they want to push for. And I think that's a remarkable change. It's not just a kind of a blind lashing out. It's actually a sort of a careful, sort of gradual, deliberative attempt to arrive at real solutions to the problems that they see around them.
From what you've seen, because you've interviewed a lot of these people, does it cross party lines? Does it cross socioeconomic borders?
It crosses. I've actually heard from some investment bankers today who said, we're part of the 1% and we care. So I think we might have a second movement on the way, too.
All right.
Somebody's shouting in my ear.
Well, it's a New York Stock Exchange. Right. It's noisy down here. All right, Professor Robert Hockett, we appreciate your joining us. It's a white paper. The title of this is The Way Forward, Moving from Post-Bubble to Renewed Growth and Prosperity. We thank you for joining us.